Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat. Resolves.
Right.
Now, before you attack
Does
me-
anyone have an answer?
Well played.
Good game.
Hello, you're watching Jumbo Commander, and today's deck tech is featuring Jodah Archmage Eternal. Jodah Archmage Eternal is 1 blue, red, white for a 4/3 flying human wizard. And when you have Jodah on the battlefield, you may pay Wooburg, white, blue, black, red, green, rather than pay the mana cost for spells that you cast. First thing to clarify, this is a 5-color deck. Even though Jodah's casting cost only has Jeskai in it, because it has all of the mana symbols in its text box, Jodah lets you play every color card in Magic. And that's what we're going to want to do, play every color card and play the biggest, most massive cards that we can, because Jodah lets us only pay Wooburg to get them into play. Now, 5 mana is actually a lot, and that color combination is nothing to just take lightly. We will have to pay attention to our mana and our early game, but man, we're really going to want to play some big spells and get big discounts on them. But how many big spells do we want? How much support do we want for Jodah? If someone just kills our Jodah, are we screwed? So let's jump right in and talk about big mana tribal. Because what we really want to do with Jodah is cast gigantic spells. And by the way, we cast them. That is really great. We're not just cheating these things into play, and so we get the cast trigger off of Eldrazi. Ulamog will exile 2 things. Kozilek will destroy a permanent. Emrakul will take someone's turn, and It That Betrays is just gigantic. It's just a great card that's gigantic. But we get the cast triggers, and there's some other cards that have great cast triggers. I have to say Zakama Primal Calamity has one of the best cast triggers around, because we can cheat it in for Wooburg, float all of this mana, because we're going to have some mana ramp in this deck. And because we cast it from our hand, we get to untap all of the lands we control. Zakama lets us deploy even more big fatties, or start destroying creatures, artifacts, or enchantments. This card works perfectly with Jodah. And then we get to go crazy. Look through your collection, look online, try to find the best big mana spells, the ones that you really like. People are going to gravitate towards Time Stretch, 10 mana, take 2 extra turns. That's just crippling. Expropriate, 9 mana. Let's just steal things and take extra turns. Rise of the Dark Realms lets you steal every single graveyard. I think I like Eternal Dominion. It's not as good as these other cards, but it's definitely more epic. 10 CMC. Search target opponent's library for an artifact, creature, enchantment, or land card and put that card into play under your control. Then that player shuffles his or her library. That's like a bad bribery, right? But this has the epic ability. So you can't play any more spells for the rest of the game, and then you just keep casting this Eternal Dominion over and over again. That's why I say it's not actually that good of a card. If your engine gets going, you're going to drop Eldrazi after Time Stretch, after Rise of the Dark Realms, and another Eldrazi and a Zakama. Like, you're just going to go crazy. You might not even want to cast Eternal Dominion, but come on, it's a great way to win a game of Magic, right? And that's what you want to do, is fill your deck full of great ways to win at Magic. But that's the fun part, okay? Right now, we need to talk about enabling this big mana strategy, because we need to get to the ability to cast these gigantic monsters. And I think the first thing we want to do is embrace Jodah. Jodah's ability to put things into play is awesome, and that will remind us of another card, Fist of Suns. Fist of Suns is just an artifact that does the exact same thing as Jodah. So if we're built to take advantage of Jodah, we might as well include Fist of Suns as well. Felwar Stone is the base level of mana ramp we want. It's fast, it fixes us, it's great. And on the top end, we have Prismatic Geoscope, which will add X mana in any combination of colors, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. We're going to control every basic land type. Prismatic Geoscope taps for any combination of different colors. That's huge, because sometimes these mana rocks can get in our way of producing the exact right mana we want. You would think that Gilded Lotus would be a great include in this deck, and I don't think Gilded Lotus is bad, but I feel like it's not good enough, because it gives us 3 mana of any one color. When creating a 5-color deck that relies heavily on getting to all 5 colors, I think we're going to need to be really critical about our fixing and our ramp. Crystalline Crawler is 4 generic mana for a 1/1, but we're not going to pay 4 generic mana, it's not going to be a 1/1, because it has Converge. It enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. Hopefully we'll spend 4 different colors of mana, and so it'll come in as a 5/5, and then we can remove one of those +1/+1 counters to add a mana to our mana pool. We can also tap it to add more +1/+1 counters to it. And the great thing about Crystalline Crawler is that it can store up these counters and use them all in a single turn. That means as soon as we have Jodah, we can cash in all the counters on our Crystalline Crawler, creating tons of different types of mana and immediately cast big spells. This is really critical in this deck. It also opens up an interesting interaction. Crystalline Crawler costs 4 mana and we get this artifact, but we can still cast it with Jodah. And that would mean it would enter the battlefield with 5 +1/+1 counters, more than you could casting it normally. And that's because of an interesting rules interaction. We can also look at a card like Pentad Prism, which has Sunburst. Pentad Prism, you could only have 2 charge counters on it because you could only pay 2 different colors of mana to cast it. But with Jodah, you could theoretically cast it with 5 different colors of mana and put 5 counters on it, making it an interesting card, although maybe not powerful enough. The Sunburst mechanic is a little bit underpowered, unless you look at a card like maybe Suncrusher, might just barely sneak in only because it's interesting. Suncrusher is 9 mana for a 3/3, but it's got that Sunburst, so if you play it with Jodah, you could pay 5 mana for an 8/8 that has a pretty cool ability on it. I don't know if this is exactly what we're looking for. The Eldrazi seem a little bit more powerful, but Sunburst is definitely a cool way to get around the limitations written on the card. But let's talk about another creature that can ramp us like crazy, and that's Ramos Dragon Engine. This is only 6 mana flying 4/4 legendary dragon, but it will again build up counters as we cast other spells. And by the way, our spells we cast with Jodah are cast. Okay, and then we can remove counters from Ramos to just give us white, white, blue, blue, black, black, red, red, green, green. That's 2 activations of our Jodah, just a really solid include. You know, we should look at our mana base a little bit closer, and I want to look at Mana Confluence, Cascading Cataracts, and Exotic Orchard. Each one of these gives us a different kind of effect, and I think Mana Confluence is great. I think Exotic Orchard and that Felwar Stone I mentioned are just great. I do want to be a little bit careful about Cascading Cataracts because it is mana disadvantage. I have to spend 6 mana to get the Wooburg that I need. I don't know if I like that trade-off, and on its own it only produces colorless mana. Sometimes I need specific mana to ramp and then maybe different mana to cast Jodah. I'm going to be very critical of this land in my deck, but I know a lot of people are just slamming it right in their builds. I think we need to look at it carefully and find out if it's doing what we want it to do, or if just building a really well-tuned mana base makes Cascading Cataracts a useless land. When thinking about big mana tribal, I did think about one specific mechanic, and that's Clash. Clash means we turn the top card of our library over, and if we have a higher CMC, we win and we get something great. But most Clash cards suck. Recross the Paths, though, is pretty awesome. You reveal cards from the top of your library until you get a land, you put that land card into play, the rest on your bottom, and then you clash. And if you win, you get Recross the Paths back to your owner's hand. That's great, because our CMC should be really high. Actually, it ends up being a mix. You know, we still have a ton of lands. Like, we have 40 lands in this deck. We have some cards like Recross the Path, and you can see Rites of Flourishing right there. So we shouldn't feel too bad if we clash and lose. But if we can cast Recross the Paths several times, that's a lot of value. And Rites of Flourishing is something we might want to consider, because we might be able to take advantage of these land drops more than our opponents, and we might be able to take advantage of this card draw more than our opponents. It's definitely meta dependent, and a lot of you will shy away from the group hug mentality, but I just want to throw it out there that this could be effective. One final way to get up to big mana is with the mana doublers. I have Mirari's Wake and Zendikar Resurgent here, but you can also look into some of the symmetrical effects like Mana Flare or Heartbeat of Spring. Again, if you're interested in that take, because I honestly think that you can use the mana better than your opponents if you build your deck with these big, splashy, rewarding spells. You know, I've been talking a lot about casting spells, and we should focus on that because we need mana to cast Jodah and activate Jodah, but we might not even need all that mana if we can just cheat the spells into play. Augury Primal Storm will cast your opponent's spells as well as the top of your library. Narset Enlightened Master does not hit the creatures that we've mentioned, but it will hit some of those crazy over-the-top spells. If you want to cast everything, just cast Omniscience first. It costs 10 mana, but once you do, you can just play the rest of your hand out no problem. And then there's Sunbird's Invocation, rewarding you for paying huge CMC spells, going deeper into your deck to play even more spells. It's just a solid card in a lot of decks, and this one will really let you cheat things into play. Because by the way, Sunbird's Invocation works great with Jodah, because even if you spend Wooburg to cast a spell, the converted mana cost of the spell is still what it is even though you didn't pay for it. So let's say you're casting Omniscience with Jodah. You only paid Wooburg to cast it, but Sunbird's Invocation will trigger for 10. That's a lot of value. By the way, the Sunbirds, Augury, Narset, they all say cast, and that's important versus putting things into play. Because when you cast an Eldrazi, you get the cast trigger, and some of the time casting something is way better than just putting it into play. Now, it's not to say I wouldn't take a free Eldrazi on the battlefield, and that's why I might be including Tooth and Nail, Selvala Stampede, Defense of the Heart, these ways to put awesome things onto the battlefield. Selvala Stampede is really over the top and fun, but Tooth and Nail and Defense of the Heart can get you the exact creatures you're looking for. So if you do have a set of combination creatures, then maybe these cards would be a better include. If you do have a combination of creatures, I'd suggest Fierce Empath to go and get the exact creatures that you're looking for. And of course, if you like the Selvala Stampede idea, you want to be a little bit more random, I am a huge fan of the next card, Unexpected Results. It's just great. 2 green-blue for a sorcery, you just get a random card from your deck. If it's a land, you get Unexpected Results back again to try next turn. And hopefully it's some big stupid spell that you get to cast, and then Unexpected Results is awesome. Again, it's a numbers game in this deck, but I think you're pretty likely to hit something huge and just feel great about yourself. And then there's Brilliant Ultimatum. White, white, blue, 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 black, black. Oh, those mana requirements. But we're gonna have perfect mana in this deck, guys, right? Okay. This is a fact or fiction, but as they divide up the piles, you get to cast one of them for free. This is gonna put people to the test. It's gonna be awesome. You're hardly ever gonna get any 5-0s in this split. Oh my gosh. It's gonna be so much fun to have them just be in misery about how to split this up when they know everything is getting cast. I mentioned a handful of big spells, and then all of these enablers, the ability to ramp really heavily to be able to cast the big spells or cheat the big spells into play, especially with our Commander Jodah. But we're really going to need a lot of card draw and solid card draw to get us there. And the reason why is because a lot of our draws are going to end up being partial mulligans. When you draw a 7-card hand and there's an Eldrazi in here, it's like you drew 6 cards, because you're a long ways away from playing that Eldrazi. And so you need the card draw to move forward into the game. Now, we might be focused on awesome card draw. Let me explain awesome card draw and how that's different than practical card draw. And then we'll include a little bit of both. Myojin of Seeing Winds is 10 mana for a 3/3. But when this legendary spirit comes into play, if you cast it from your hand, which by the way, you do with Jodah, it comes in with a divinity counter and is indestructible. And then at instant speed, anytime you want, you can remove a divinity counter and then draw a card for each permanent you control. You're gonna draw so many cards. I mean, I'd say at least 5. Gotta be more than that. Myojins are really cool, and the fact that you cast them with Jodah means that they could fit into this deck really well. Myojin of Infinite Rage kills all the lands, Myojin of Night's Reach destroys their hands, Myojin of Life's Web lets you get stuff from the graveyard, and Myojin of Cleansing Fire wipes the board except for the Myojin itself. And these are really expensive to cast, but if you can cheat them into play, that's great. But let's go back to the blue Myojin. And I'm going to include this card because it's awesome and I want to draw like 20 cards in a single turn. It's going to be great. But this is not the card draw I'm really looking for. I want the card draw that sort of propels me forward to get to where I can cast a 10-drop. And there's another few cards that people really like sticking in this big CMC mana deck that might not do what you want it to do. Interpret the Signs is awesome again. 6 CMC, it lets you scry 3 and then draw cards equal to that card's converted mana cost. Okay, so if you scry into a Myojin of Seeing Winds, you will draw 10 cards. That's over the top amazing. Rush of Knowledge is 5 CMC and you can draw cards equal to the highest converted mana cost among permanents you control. Again, if the Myojin's on the battlefield, you're drawing 10. This amount of card draw has us reeling. We're so excited about it. But I'm really want you to look at things that are a little bit closer to practical. And I think my favorite card in this category has to be Painful Truths because it's great. You might notice it has Converge again, and so if you pay 3 different colors of mana to cast this, you draw 3 and lose 3. If you use Jodah to cast Painful Truths, you will draw 5 and lose 5. That is so cool. This is the flexible card draw we really want. And I love that I can play this on 3 and propel me into things I need to play later. Also, allied strategies, if you like the idea of paying 5 and drawing 5, this has Domain, another thing that works really well with our mana base. So as long as we're playing gigantic converted mana cost tribal, we can also have cards like Combustible Gearhulk. We will draw 3 once people realize that we're playing 10 mana Myojins. Or what would be great if someone's like, no, I'll take the damage. And then we like 20 them. That would be amazing. Also, the new Demon Lord Belzenok could just draw us a single card, but we could get lucky and draw 3 or 4. That'd be great. We also have cards like Sorin Grim Nemesis, 4 white-black for a Planeswalker, but I want to just look at that +1 ability, which is reveal the top card of your library, put that card in your hand, and each opponent loses life equal to its converted mana cost. Opponents can just be nugged for double digits of damage. Sorin can do so much. And Twilight Prophet does a great impersonation of Sorin. If we have the City's Blessing, then we can draw a card and then drain everyone, and then we gain that much life. Also, I don't think I'm going to include this next card, Augury Adept, because it's a little bit tricky to use, but it's 1 white blue, Azorius, for a 2/2, and when it deals combat damage to a player, I get to reveal the top card of my library, and then I gain life. I'd rather drain the opponents, I'd rather have something a little bit more reliable. And you might even notice that I was kind of down on some of these 6 CMC, 5 CMC draw spells, and I just showed you 3 more 6 CMC draw spells. So even in my deck, the things that I'm excited about, I'm not excited about the mana cost that is required to draw cards. I really need to actively try to pull the mana cost lower toward Painful Truths mana cost, not this 6 converted mana cost. Geez, I really need to make sure that my card draw is something that helps me when I need the help, and that's when I'm not at 10 mana. Speaking of which, let's talk about a card draw spell that costs 10 mana. Kozilek, the Great Distortion, lets us refill our hand, and Kozilek, Bircher of Truth, draws us 4 cards. This is just more Eldrazi. I think that these can easily slot in very well. By the way, there's no way I can actually cast Kozilek without Jodah. There are a couple cards that have colorless mana in it, but I think this is just in here for Jodah activations, which might mean that it's not very good. Because honestly, if I have a mana doubler, I could totally cast Kozilek, the Butcher of Truth, and so maybe Great Distortion doesn't fit in. But also, I really like the idea of flipping these over with a Sorin Grim Nemesis or a Twilight Prophet, just draining everyone out. And that's why I think we can sort of play with this high converted mana cost tribal. Let's look at a draw spell that actually has 8 converted mana cost, but we never pay 8 for. Dig Through Time. The CMC is 8, but we often don't pay 8 for it. Or Treacherous Terrain. We're probably going to basic land cycle it or cast it with Jodah, but if we flip it over, it would deal 8 to everyone. Or Krosan Tusker. This is a green divination. We're gonna cycle this. We don't need a 6/5 on the battlefield, but if we ever flip it up with the Demon Lord or with Sorin, we're gonna be really happy. And this transitions us into the next category we have, which is high converted mana cost tribal. We can see the payoffs in some of these draw spells we have. We can also see the payoffs in cards like Vile Smasher the Fierce. If we have this high converted mana cost, as soon as we cast these spells, we could just be dealing damage all over the place, and Vile Smasher works great with Jodah. Remember, even though we cast it for 5, the converted mana cost is its converted mana cost on the stack. So it will do the full damage even if we only spent 5 to cast it. And same thing goes with like Dig Through Time. If we just spent blue and exiled a bunch of cards, Vile Smasher will still do the full 8 to people. We can also go deeper into this strategy with Baneful Omen. 4 black for an enchantment, and at the beginning of your end step, you reveal the top card of your library, and then each opponent loses life equal to that card's converted mana cost. So again, this could do tons of damage, or you could just reveal lands. You could also give away your plan for next turn to your opponents. This card is more fun than good. I like the idea of everyone just like leaning over your deck, just waiting to see what's on top to see if people are dead or not. If we want to inflate the mana cost, I mentioned cards that have cycling or alternative casting costs. Let's look at cards that have Undaunted. This is great in Commander because if you're playing at a 4-player game, all of these casting costs get reduced by 3, making them very manageable. Coastal Breach and Sublime Exhalation will give us this board control that we need. By the way, this is a control deck, kind of. You need to be able to last until you have quite a bit of mana to play your fatties, so you do need to be able to control the board. Next we have Seeds of Renewal and Curtain's Call, but I think I like Divergent Transformations, not only because the art is amazing and it's an awesome card, but because we might be able to change in some of our creatures for maybe bigger ones. This lets us exile creatures. We can exile our own, by the way, or our opponent's creatures if we really need them gone. And then they reveal cards from the top of their library until they get another creature, and bam, they get that creature onto the battlefield. So if we have some stupid manland or a Solemn Simulacrum, we can exile them and trade them up into hopefully something better. Or if we have something we desperately need to get rid of, we can roll the dice on that as well. We can also dodge converted mana costs. Pernicious Deed could be a board wipe that wipes away everything. Oh, except for all of your Eldrazi and all of your Gigantic Neogen and all of your important stuff. Pernicious Deed is great, and of course I already mentioned Sublime Exhalation. Blasphemous Act also does a great impression of this, because often we're casting it for like 1 in a red, but its converted mana cost is 9, and again, we need board wipes in this deck. Also, Austere Command can take out exactly what we need, artifacts, enchantments, or creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less, because we have all of the creatures with converted mana cost 4 or greater, including our commander. Pretty great. And one last note, I know that people are seeing the 5 colors and they want to put great 5-color cards in here, and so I've seen a lot of decks running Legacy Weapon. Legacy Weapon is cool, don't get me wrong. It's 7 mana, and you can pay WUBRG and remove target permanent from the game. That is awesome. Amazing art, cool card. If you really want to play it for flavor, great, put it in your deck. But if you really want to make this deck function a little bit better, I would make sure to have your removal, your interaction, be a little bit lower converted mana cost. Think about running cards like Anguished Unmaking or Decimate. People are going to know that we're going to have powerful spells that will win the late game, so we need to shore up our early game and have answers for our opponents. I also want to mention a defensive card like Collective Restraint. We're going to have great mana, so our opponents are going to have to pay 5 for every creature that attacks us. So that's Jodah Archmage Eternal. What did we learn from this? Well, we need to pay extra attention to our mana base, our ramp, our ability to not get color screwed or mana screwed when we're playing this deck. We need to fill it full of huge, gigantic payoffs, because if we're paying 4 mana to get Jodah on the battlefield and then WUBRG to be able to play a spell, We need to make sure we have the best spells possible, and then we can support this big spell tribal with crazy ways to draw cards. We can wield our converted mana cost like weapons, and really prevent our opponents from doing very much in the early game. And by the way, those control elements will work great in the late game. They answer Jodah, we get stumped a little bit, and then bam, we redeploy some of the control until we can get a huge fatty out again. I think that this is a really interesting synergy, a pretty well-balanced deck, and honestly what's great about it is that if you have the core pieces in place, you can fill this full of your favorite huge creatures, your best gigantic spells, and have tons of fun going over the top of all of your friends. Alright everyone, I hope you enjoyed Jodah Archmage Eternal. My name is Jumbo Commander, and I want to thank you, the viewer. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Talk to me in the comments, talk to me on Twitter, or find me on Patreon because I got some great patrons. We're chatting about stuff in Discord, they're helping me with deck techs, and I want to thank you guys so much for all of your support. Alright everyone, I'll see you really soon with even more great stuff. Are we sick of Dominaria yet? Do we want more Dominaria stuff? We'll figure it out. I'll see you soon with more deck techs.